WION this morning, where a day after the damning report on the Ethiopian air crash, Boeing has now defended what it claims to be the fundamental safety of its 737 MAX 8 aircrafts. However, it has also pledged to take all necessary steps to ensure the jet's airworthiness. Now, a statement released by the Boeing CEO has said, and I quote here, "We remain pretty confident in the fundamental safety of the 737 MAX, adding that the impending navigation software fixes will make the aircraft amongst the safest planes ever to fly." Now, the statements came hours after the Ethiopian officials said that the pilots of the doomed plane had followed the company's recommended procedures prior to a crash that left 157 people dead. Now, nearly a month after the Ethiopian Airlines crash, experts investigating the crash have presented their preliminary report, and as per the findings announced by Ethiopia's Minister of Transport, Dagmavit Moges, the flight experienced nosedive conditions. Now, the minister has said, and I quote here, "The crew performed all procedures repeatedly provided by the manufacturer, but was simply unable to control the aircraft." Now, the investigators have in fact put the spotlight on Boeing 737 MAX's anti-stall system, or what is also known as MCAS, which is said to have resulted in the plane nosediving, leading to the crash. Now, investigators have said that Boeing will have to work on its automated control system. The preliminary report is in fact based on data collected for the black box recorders of the Boeing 737 MAX 8 which crashed. Remember, the Ethiopian Airlines flight crashed on the 10th of March, just 13 minutes after having taken off from the airport at Addis Ababa, killing all 157 people on board.
The initial findings of the investigation, on the basis of initial information gathered during the course of investigation, the following facts have been determined. Number one, the aircraft possessed a valid certificate of airworthiness. The second one, the crew obtained the license and qualifications to conduct the flight. And third, the takeoff roll appeared very normal. And the fourth one is, the crew performed all the procedures repeatedly provided by the manufacturer, but was not able to control the aircraft. Based on this initial information gathered during the course of investigation, two safety recommendations has been forwarded in the preliminary report. The first one is, since repetitive uncommanded aircraft nose-down conditions are noticed in this preliminary investigation, it is recommended that the aircraft flight control system related to the flight controllability shall be reviewed by the manufacturer. And the second one is, aviation authorities shall verify that the review of the aircraft flight control system related to flight controllability has been adequately addressed by the manufacturer before release of the aircraft to operations. So these are the two major recommendations that has been forwarded by the investigation team in the preliminary report. We really like to thank the whole international community for the support that has been forwarded to our government, and even the medias, international medias, who are working day and night to provide for the whole international community.
Meanwhile, the family of the American who was killed in the Ethiopian air crash has filed a lawsuit against the airline. Now, Boeing and Rosemount Aerospace and the manufacturer of a part of the aircraft, that is the focus of the investigators. The complaint was in fact filed in the U.S. federal court in Chicago by the parents of Samir Stumo, who lawyers have said was in fact on a work trip when the Ethiopian Airlines flight 302 crashed on the 10th of March, soon after having taken off from Addis Ababa, killing all 157 people on board. It was in fact the first lawsuit that was filed on behalf of a U.S. victim but demands for a class action lawsuit against Boeing are in fact growing. A class action lawsuit is one where one party represents a group of people, that is a class, and goes to a court against a common defendant. Now, the Ethiopian Airlines crash was the second crash in about 5 months involving the same Boeing 737 MAX 8 model. Now, October's Lion Air crash in Indonesia had left 189 people dead after it crashed just immediately, minutes after having taken off from the airport in Jakarta. Now, Boeing must answer some tough questions, but America's aviation watchdog, the Federal Aviation Administration, should also be put in the dock here. Now, the aviation watchdog in a statement has said that they will take appropriate action as they learn more and more about the crash. But they too must be made to answer some pretty tough questions, mainly as to why did the FAA allow the Boeing 737 MAX 8 to fly, knowing pretty well that there were certain issues with its anti-stall system. Now, at the moment, all American-made aircrafts are subjected to testing and evaluation that is approved by the U.S. Congress on the face of it. But this evaluation is like an open book exam. Boeing handles much of the testing and evaluation of their aircrafts. The FAA just supervises these exams. So Boeing is testing its own planes effectively and is giving itself a certificate that its planes are pretty safe to fly. Now, the question, of course, is how can we expect Boeing not to cheat in giving itself a certificate of being airworthy? The fact is that Boeing has just got used to cheating and getting away with it. A large PR effort and also lobbying allows Boeing to fly under the radar. The relationship between the U.S. president and Boeing is hardly metaphoric. Boeing literally ferries American presidents in a modified Boeing 747, which is also known as the Air Force One. Ties between Boeing and the current U.S. President Donald Trump run deep. Trump is an aviation enthusiast and once even owned the Trump Shuttle airline. In its 3-year-long existence, the airline was in close contact with Boeing. Trump also used a personal Boeing 757 before he assumed office in January 2017. Now, Trump's connection with Boeing CEO Dennis Muilenburg isn't new either. Now, Trump had personally negotiated with Muilenburg to try and lower the cost of a future version of the U.S. presidential aircraft. And then, in July last year, Boeing won a $3.9 billion contract to replace the two Air Force One jets. If signposting is anything to go by, then Trump's preference for Boeing has been more than just apparent. The U.S. president has used Boeing products and sites as backdrops for major presidential announcements. In July last year, Trump used his visit to a Boeing plant in St. Louis to talk about the impact of his tax overhaul bill. But Trump isn't alone in the Boeing boat. There are other top White House officials who also have very close ties with the aircraft manufacturer. Now, take the acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan. Now, he's worked with Boeing for about 31 years before joining the Pentagon. Former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley has been nominated by Boeing to join its board of directors. Boeing's stature makes it a natural choice for American administration to cozy up to it. It is the United States' second largest defense contractor. The company has received $104 billion in terms of unclassified defense contracts between 2014 and 2018. It is no surprise then that the Trump administration has repeatedly urged its allies to buy what is made by Boeing. We also earlier spoke with Keith Mackay, the aviation safety consultant and former airline captain. Listen to what he had to say.
It does complicate the situation. There's a lot of blame to go around. The MCAS system to which you referred, in my opinion, was very poorly designed with no redundancy. It used only one sensor, and if that sensor failed, it would activate the system. When this happened, it gave a lot of confusing alerts in the cockpit. The pilot's instruments would not agree. The aircraft would think that it was stalling because the sensor was providing erroneous information when in fact it was not. But the pilots would have what we call the stick shaker or the stall warning going off in their hands. They would have various lights on indicating the instruments weren't reading the same, and they would have to take very quick action. Apparently, at some point, they did take the proper action by turning off the switches that control the system. They then were supposed to use a manual system that involved turning a big wheel with a hand crank on it, and that would fly the airplane perfectly well. But instead, against Boeing's procedures, they turned the switches back on again, which just repeated the situation and eventually caused the crash. The Boeing procedure tells pilots that once the switches are turned off, they are to remain off for the balance of the flight.